Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars drift past the main view screen. The ship was 3 days into what should have been a routine patrol of Sector 7, the outer edge of human space. Everything seemed normal to normal, perhaps? "Captain, we're getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors," called out communications specialist Amy Davis from her station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that made Morrison turn around. "What kind of readings?" Morrison asked, walking over to her console. Amy frowned at her screen. "I'm not sure, sir. The computer can't identify the energy signature. It's like nothing in our databases." Chief Engineer Lisa Brooks looked up from her engineering station. "I'm seeing it too, Captain. Whatever it is, it's big. Really big. And it's moving toward us." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. In 20 years of deep space service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming danger. "Ryan, what do you see on tactical?" Morrison asked his weapons officer. Tactical Officer Ryan Carter shook his head. "Nothing on conventional sensors, Captain. But there's definitely something out there. The space around us is ... wrong somehow." Morrison moved to the center of the bridge. The Defiant was one of humanity's most advanced ships, with a crew of 800 of Earth's best and brightest. It faced down alien pirates, explored unknown worlds, and defended human colonies from hostile forces. But whatever was approaching them now felt different, ancient, powerful. "All stop," Morrison ordered. "Lisa, can you boost our sensor range?" "Already trying, Captain," Lisa replied, her fingers flying over her controls. "But it's like the readings are being blocked by something. Wait, ... Captain, you need to see this." The main view screen flickered and changed. Where empty space had been moments before, now showed something that made everyone on the bridge gasp. A massive structure hung in the void, easily 10 times the size of their ship. It looked like it was made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect. Strange patterns pulsed along its surface with a sickly green glow. "What is that thing?" "Your warrior is in the ground. Worry war when you're in I will wire render where am I resurrect crying we Emergency lights began flashing and warning alarms filled the bridge. "Report," Morrison shouted over the noise. "Hull stress is increasing rapidly," Lisa called out. "It's like we're being pulled toward that thing. There's no gravity well showing on sensors." "Engines at full reverse," Morrison ordered.
"Right.
"No good." "Captain," Ryan reported, "we're not moving. If anything, we're accelerating toward it." Morrison grabbed the communications panel. "This is Captain Morrison to all hands. Prepare for emergency procedures. All crew to emergency stations." The ship groaned around them as invisible forces tore at its hull. Through the view screen, the alien structure grew larger and larger. Now they could see openings in its surface, like mouths waiting to swallow them whole. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup inside that thing," Lisa shouted. "Whatever it's planning to do, it's going to happen soon." Morrison hit the emergency broadcast button. "Mayday, Mayday. This is the UES Defiant. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces in Sector 7. Coordinates follow. We are being pulled toward an alien structure of unknown origin. Request immediate assistance." "Captain," Amy said, her voice tight with fear, "I don't think our message is getting through. Something is blocking all communications." The alien structure now filled the entire view screen. They could see details on its surface, symbols that hurt to look at, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. The green glow was getting brighter. Distance to the structure? Morrison asked. 2,000 meters and closing fast, Ryan replied. At this rate, we'll make contact in less than 3 minutes. Morrison made a decision. Lisa prepared to jettison the log buoys. Maybe someone will find them and know what happened to us. Aye, Captain. Log buoys prepared. Amy, record this message. Use Defiant Captain Jake Morrison commanding. We have encountered an alien structure of unknown origin in Sector 7. The structure is pulling us in despite full reverse thrust. We cannot break free. We cannot communicate. With Earth's command, if anyone finds this message, warn Earth. There are things out here that we don't understand. Things that are far more powerful than we imagined. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the hull, they could hear a sound that no one should be able to hear in the vacuum of space. A low, thrumming noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Captain, the hull is starting to buckle, Lisa reported. Whatever force is pulling us is also changing the molecular structure of our armor plating. That's impossible, Ryan said. Tell that to the sensors, Lisa shot back. Morrison watched the alien structure grow ever larger on the screen. Now he could see that the openings weren't just holes. They were lined with what looked like metal teeth. The entire thing looked less like a ship and more like some kind of massive organism. 1,000 meters, Ryan announced. Jettison the log buoys, Morrison ordered. Buoys away, Captain. The small recording devices shot away from the Defiant, their tiny engines carrying them back toward human space. Morrison hoped they would make it. He hoped someone would find them and learn from their fate. 500 meters, Ryan called out. The green glow from the alien structure was now so bright it hurt to look at the view screen. The thrumming sound was getting louder and Morrison could feel it in his bones. Around the bridge, his crew worked frantically at their stations, trying everything they could think of to break free. Captain, Amy said, her voice barely audible over the noise. I'm picking up something on the emergency frequencies. It sounds like ... voices. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a sound emerged that made everyone's blood run cold. It was voices, but not human voices. They spoke in harmonics that no human throat could produce, in languages that had never been heard on Earth, and somehow, impossibly, Morrison understood what they were saying. Welcome, humans. We have been waiting for you. Captain, we're entering the structure, Ryan announced. I can see some kind of docking bay ahead. Morrison grabbed the arms of his command chair as the ship was pulled deeper into the alien vessel. The view screen showed corridors and chambers that stretched away into darkness. Everything was built on a scale that dwarfed human engineering. This wasn't just a ship. It was a city, a world unto itself. All hands brace for impact, Morrison ordered, but there was no impact. Instead, the Defiant came to a gentle stop inside a vast chamber. The pulling force that had brought them here simply ... stopped. Emergency lights continued to flash, but the hull stress readings were dropping back to normal. We've stopped moving, Lisa reported, her voice filled with disbelief. Morrison looked around at his crew. All of them were staring at him, waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? They were inside an alien structure, possibly millions of miles from Earth, with no way to communicate and no way to escape. Amy, keep trying to reach Earth Command, he said finally. Lisa, I want a full damage report. Ryan, scan for any other ships or life forms. And everyone, stay alert. I don't think our hosts are done with us yet, eh? As if summoned by his words, the chamber around them began to glow with the same green light they had seen from outside. And in that light, shapes began to move, tall, graceful figures that seemed to glide rather than walk. Captain Jake Morrison and the crew of the UES Defiant were about to learn that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that some neighbors were far more dangerous than others. 11 years had passed since the UES Defiant vanished without a trace. Earth's command had searched for 2 full years before officially declaring the ship lost with all hands. The loss of 800 of humanity's best had been a heavy blow. But what followed was far worse. President Kate Williams stood at the window of her office in Geneva, watching the latest refugee transport land at the spaceport below. The massive ship was packed with survivors from the colony world of New Dallas, another human settlement that had fallen to the Zephyrian Empire. She could see the long lines of people waiting to disembark, carrying everything they owned in small bags and cases. How many this time? She asked without turning around. Fleet Admiral Tony Rodriguez checked his tablet. 40,000 survivors from New Dallas. That brings the total number of displaced colonists to over 3 million in the past year alone. Kate finally turned away from the window. At 55, she looked older than her years. The weight of leading humanity through its darkest period had aged her rapidly. What's the latest from the front lines? Not good, Tony admitted. The Zephyrians have taken 3 more colonies this month. Their fleet is moving toward the Kepler system next. If they take that, they'll control the entire Outer Rim. Kate sank into her chair. When she had been elected president 5 years ago, humanity had controlled over 60 colony worlds. Now they were down to less than 20, and the number was shrinking every month. The Zephyrian Empire had always been aggressive, but they had respected human military strength. That respect had died with the Defiant. Without humanity's most powerful warship, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically. The reptilian aliens saw weakness and moved quickly to exploit it. But the Zephyrians were not the only threat. The insectoid Krell Collective had formed an alliance with several other hostile species, creating what they called the Dominion Alliance. Together they controlled more than half of known space and were expanding rapidly. What about our allies? Kate asked. Any word from the Altarians? Tony shook his head. They're sympathetic, but they can't help us militarily. They're pacifist. Government won't authorize military action, even to help us. Ambassador Helen Price is still trying to work with them through diplomatic channels, but it's slow going. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kate's secretary entered, looking worried. Madam President, Dr. Peter Kane is here for his briefing. Send him in. Dr. Kane was Earth's leading expert on alien biology and behavior. He had spent years studying the various species that made up the Galactic Council. Insights had helped humanity navigate the complex politics of interstellar diplomacy for decades. Peter, what do you have for us? Kate asked as the thin, gray-haired scientist entered the room. Dr. Kane set his briefcase on the desk and pulled out a thick folder. I'm afraid it's worse than we thought. My contacts in the Galactic Council have confirmed our worst fears. Dominion Alliance is planning a final assault on the Sol system. The room fell silent. Kate felt her blood turn cold. Tony asked. Within the next 6 months, they're massing fleets at the edge of our territory. Intelligence suggests they have over 500 ships ready for the attack. Kate closed her eyes. Humanity's entire remaining fleet consisted of barely 100 ships, most of them older. Designs that couldn't match the advanced technology of their enemies. There's more, Dr. Kane continued. I've been analyzing Zephyrian battle tactics from their recent conquests. They're not just taking our colonies anymore. They're enslaving the populations. Survivors we've been receiving are only the ones who manage to escape. Most of our people are still trapped on the occupied worlds. Tony slammed his fist on the desk. We have to do something. We can't just sit here and wait for them to destroy us. What can we do? Kate asked bitterly. We're outnumbered 5-2. 1. Our technology is years behind theirs. Half our colonies have already fallen. Dr. Kane leaned forward. There might be another way. I've been working with some of the younger species in the Galactic Council, the ones who are also threatened by Dominion expansion. If we could form our own alliance, it would take years to organize. Tony interrupted. We don't have years. We might not even have months. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, High Commander Vexstar of the Zephyrian Empire stood in the command center of his flagship. The massive reptilian alien was over 8 feet tall, with scales that gleamed like polished metal and eyes that burned with predatory intelligence. Report, he hissed to his subordinate. The human colony of New Dallas has fallen completely. Commander, all military installations have been destroyed. Surviving population has been processed according to your orders. Vextar's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Excellent. And the others? Colony Beta and Harmony Station will fall within the week. The humans are retreating to their core worlds, just as you predicted. For years, the Zephyrians had been held back by human military strength. The loss of their most powerful warship had changed everything. Now the path to human space lay open before them. What of the Dominion Alliance? Vextar asked. The Krell are pleased with our progress. They've agreed to provide additional support. For the final assault on Earth itself, Vextar turned to look at the tactical display showing human space. Red markers indicated conquered worlds, while the remaining blue dots representing free human colonies grew smaller each day. The humans fought well when they had strength, he said. But they are weak now. Broken. Soon they will learn what it means to oppose the Dominion. Back on Earth, Ambassador Helen Price was having her own problems. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going on for 3 days, and the results were not encouraging. Motion to restrict human military operations and contested. Space passes by a vote of 12-3, announced the council speaker. A tall being whose species Helen never learned to pronounce correctly, Helen stood up from the human delegation's seat. Honored council members, this restriction will make it impossible for us to defend our remaining colonies. You are essentially signing their death warrants. Perhaps, said the Krell representative, its insectoid features showing no emotion. The humans should have considered the consequences of their aggressive expansion before it led to this situation. Aggressive expansion? Helen's voice rose. We're the ones being attacked. We've lost over 40 colonies in the past 5 years because you could not defend them, hissed the Zephyrian delegate. The strong survive. The weak are consumed. This is the natural order. Helen looked around the chamber, hoping to find support among the other species. A few of the smaller delegations looked sympathetic, but most avoided her gaze. Fear of the Dominion Alliance had made cowards of them. All. The humans will withdraw their military forces from all contested sectors within 30 days, the speaker continued. Failure to comply will result in additional sanctions. As Helen gathered her papers, she caught the eye of the Altarian ambassador. The peaceful, blue-skinned alien looked genuinely sorry, but she could only shake her head helplessly. Even humanity's few remaining allies were powerless to help. That night, Helen sent an encrypted message back to Earth. The news was as bad as Kate and Tony had feared. The Galactic Council was essentially abandoning humanity to its fate. Any hope of diplomatic salvation was gone. On the mining world of Kepler-7, the last major human colony in the Outer Rim, Colonel Bradstone watched the evacuation ships lift off into the night sky. His garrison of 500 Marines was all that stood between the colony's 30,000 civilians and the approaching Zephyrian fleet. How long until they get here? Asked Lieutenant Sarah Kim, his second-in-command. Intelligence says 3 days. Maybe 4 if we're lucky, Brad replied. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing their defensive positions. They had some good weapons and excellent soldiers, but they were facing impossible odds. Can't win this one, can we? She asked quietly. Brad was quiet for a long moment. No, but we can buy time for the evacuation ships to get away. That's something. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Brave men and women preparing to make their last stand against overwhelming odds. They fought not because they could win, but because it was right. Because someone had to stand between the darkness and the innocent. But deep in space, a place between dimensions where normal physics held no sway, something stirred. The crew of the UES Defiant had learned things during their 11-year absence. Terrible things. Wonderful things. And now, as their species faced extinction, they were finally ready to come home. The galaxy had taught humanity harsh lessons about power and survival. Soon it would be time for humanity to return. The favor. Admiral Zexkoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the final preparations for the attack on Colony 7. The massive Zephyrian fleet stretched out before him in perfect formation, 200 of the Empire's finest warships each, one bristling with enough firepower to level a city. Status report, he commanded. All ships report ready for battle. Admiral, replied his tactical officer. The human defensive positions have been identified and targeted. They have perhaps 500 ground troops and a handful of orbital defense platforms. Nothing that can stand against our fleet, Zexkoth nodded with satisfaction. Colony 7 was the last major human settlement in the Outer Rim. Once it fell, the path to Earth itself would be clear. The humans had fought bravely, he would give them that. But bravery meant nothing against superior numbers and technology. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Begin the final assault. On the surface of Colony 7, Colonel Bradstone watched the alien ships move into attack formation. Through his binoculars, he could see the massive vessels preparing their weapons. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of the largest human destroyer. All units, this is command, he spoke into his radio. Remember, we're not trying to win this fight. We're buying time for the last evacuation ships to reach the jump point. Every minute we hold them off is another 1,000 civilians who make it to safety. His soldiers knew they were going to die. They had known it for days. But not one of them had asked to be transferred to the evacuation ships. They were Marines, and Marines didn't abandon their posts. Enemy ships are powering up their main guns, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the observation bunker. Looks like they're going to try to end this quickly. Brad keyed his radio again. All batteries prepare to fire on my command. Make every shot count. The Zephyrian fleet moved closer to the planet. Their massive ships blocked out the sun as they positioned themselves for the killing blow. Admiral Zexkoth watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The humans had chosen to make their stand, and now they would pay the price for their defiance. Target the military installations first, he ordered. Then the population centers. I want nothing left alive on this world, his weapons officer began. The targeting sequence. The fleet's main guns swiveled toward the planet, charging up with deadly energy. In moments, Colony 7 would be nothing but ash and radiation. But then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open between the Zephyrian fleet and the planet. A massive rift appeared, crackling with energy that made the alien. Sensors scream warnings. Tier in reality grew larger and larger, until it was big enough for a ship to pass through. And then, something did. The UES Defiant emerged from the dimensional rift. But it was not the same ship that had vanished 11 years ago. The vessel was now twice its original size, its hull gleaming with materials that seemed to absorb and reflect light at the same time. Strange patterns pulsed along its surface with colors that had no names, and the very space around it seemed to bend and twist. On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship, chaos erupted. Alarm klaxons wailed as sensor operators struggled to understand. What they were seeing, the readings made no sense. The human ship registered as being in multiple places at once, its energy signature fluctuating between impossible extremes. What is that thing? Zexkoth demanded. I don't know, Admiral, his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. It's definitely human in origin, but the technology... It's unlike anything in our databases. The communication systems of every ship in both fleets suddenly activated at once. A voice spoke across all frequencies, calm and clear and absolutely human. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Defiant. We've been away, we've learned things, and now we're back. On Colony 7, Colonel Brad Stone nearly dropped his binoculars. That's impossible, he whispered. The Defiant was lost 11 years ago. But there it was, hanging in space between his doomed garrison and the Zephyrian fleet. The ship looked like something out of a dream or perhaps a nightmare. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, radiating power that made the alien warships look like toys. Admiral Zexkoth recovered from his shock quickly. So, the famous human warship has returned. No matter. One ship against 200. The outcome is still certain. He opened a channel to the human vessel. Captain Morrison, I am Admiral Zexkoth of the Zephyrian Empire. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and I will grant you a quick death. And there was something in Morrison's voice that made even the hardened Zephyrian admiral feel a chill of fear. Admiral, you seem to misunderstand the situation. I'm not here to surrender. I'm here to give you a choice. Leave this system immediately, or discover what we learned during our time away. Zexkoth's pride flared. You dare threaten me? Command. 200 ships. You have one. Numbers don't matter when you don't understand what you're fighting, Morrison replied. But I'll give you a demonstration. The Defiant moved, and it was like watching physics break down. The ship didn't accelerate, it simply was in one place and then was in another, as if the space between had been folded. It appeared next to a Zephyrian destroyer, a ship that was 3 times its original size. What happened next defied everything. The aliens knew about warfare. The Defiant didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, beams of pure energy lanced out from its hull, but these beams seemed to phase in and out of reality. They passed through the destroyer's shields as if they weren't there, then solidified just long enough to slice through the alien ship's hull like a hot knife through butter. The destroyer broke apart silently, its massive bulk separating into perfectly cut sections. But there were no explosions, no fires, no deaths. The crew compartments remained intact, their life support systems still functioning. The Defiant had somehow disabled the ship without killing anyone aboard. Impossible, breathed Zexkoth, his tactical officer. Their weapons phased through our shields. How is that possible? Before anyone could answer, the Defiant moved again. This time it appeared next to a heavy cruiser. Again, the strange phasing weapons fired, and again the alien ship was neatly dissected without loss of life. The process was repeated with surgical precision, each attack demonstrating a level of technological advancement that bordered on the supernatural, in less than 5 minutes. The Defiant had disabled 20 Zephyrian warships. The attacks were so precise, so effortless, that it was clear the human ship was holding back. It could have destroyed the entire fleet if it had wanted to. Admiral, his communications officer, said, his voice shaking. I'm receiving surrender requests from 15 of our ships. They're requesting permission to withdraw. Zexkoth stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Zephyrian Empire, was being dismantled by a single human vessel. And they were doing it without even trying to. Kill his crews. This is impossible, he muttered. Where did they get this technology? As if in answer to his question, Captain Morrison's voice filled the bridge again. We met some very interesting teachers, Admiral. They showed us things about the universe that your species isn't ready to understand. They taught us that power without wisdom is meaningless, and that true strength comes from knowing when not to use it. The Defiant moved again, this time positioning itself directly in front of Zexkoth's flagship. The Admiral could see the human ship through his view screen, its hull pulsing with energies that made his eyes water to look at directly. I could destroy your entire fleet in seconds, Morrison continued. But I won't, because unlike you, we've learned that strength should be used to protect, not to conquer. So I'm going to give you one more chance, Admiral. Leave this system, leave all human space, and never return. Zexkoth felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Fear. Not just of death, but of something far worse. The human ship represented power beyond his understanding, technology that made his fleet look primitive. For the first time in his life, he was truly outmatched. What guarantee do I have that you won't attack us as we withdraw? He asked. Have my word, Morrison replied. And despite what you might think, humans still honor their promises. The Admiral looked around his bridge at his terrified crew. They were all looking to him for leadership, but what could he do? Fight a battle he couldn't win? Sacrifice his entire fleet for pride? All ships, he said finally, his voice heavy with defeat. Begin withdrawal from the system. Set course for home. As the Zephyrian fleet began to retreat, the Defiant moved one final time. Right. It appeared alongside the flagship, easily matching its speed and course. Through the view screen, Zexkoth could see the human ship's bridge, and the figure of Captain Morrison standing at its center. The human captain had aged during his time away. But there was something else different about him. His eyes held depths that seemed to contain vast knowledge, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Tell your empire, Admiral. Tell the Dominion Alliance. Tell everyone in this galaxy who thinks they can prey on. The weak and helpless, humanity is back, and we're not the same species that left. We've learned patience. we've learned wisdom. But most importantly, we've learned that some lessons can only be taught through strength. The news of what happened at Colony 7 spread across the galaxy faster than light travel itself. Within hours, every major power knew that humanity's lost warship had returned, and that it possessed technology beyond anything previously seen. Earth President Kate Williams sat in the emergency command center. Watching the footage that Colonel Brad Stone had transmitted from the planet's surface, the images showed the Defiant's impossible movements and weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves. "Is this real?" she asked Fleet Admiral Tony Rodriguez, who stood beside her with his mouth hanging open. "The data checks out," Tony replied slowly. "But I don't understand how it's possible. The energy readings alone should have torn that ship apart. And the way it moved through space... ... Dr. Peter Kane leaned forward in his chair, studying the technical readouts. "The weapons appear to function on principles we don't even have theories for. They're phasing in and out of normal space-time. It's like they learned to fight in multiple dimensions at once." Kate turned to the communication console. "Have we heard anything from Captain Morrison directly?" "Not yet, Madam President," replied the communications officer. "But we're monitoring all frequencies. If the Defiant tries to contact us, we'll know immediately." Meanwhile, in the Zephyrian capital city of Vexstar Prime, High Commander Vexstar paced back and forth in his war room. Admiral Zexgoth's report had arrived an hour ago, and its contents had shaken the Empire to its core.
"You're telling me that one human ship defeated 200 of our finest vessels?"
Vexstar hissed at the holographic image of his admiral.
"Not
defeated, my lord," Zexgoth corrected carefully, humiliated. "They disabled 20 of our ships without even trying. They could have destroyed us all, but they chose not to. That makes it even worse." Vexstar's claws scraped against the metal table. "How is this possible? What happened to them during those 11 years?" "I don't know, my lord. Whatever they learned, it has made them more powerful than anything we've ever encountered. The ship exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their weapons ignore our shields completely. Their captain, there was something different about him. It's like he had seen things that changed him." The High Commander turned to his science advisor, a thin reptilian with cybernetic implants covering half his skull. "What is your assessment?" "Based on the energy signatures, my lord, I believe the humans have made contact with beings from a higher dimensional plane. The technology they displayed is not just advanced, it's fundamentally different from anything in our understanding of physics." Vexstar felt a chill run down his spine. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on military strength and technological superiority. If the humans now possessed weapons and abilities beyond their comprehension, everything would change. "What are our options?" he asked. "We could attempt to reverse engineer their technology," the science advisor suggested. "But without understanding the underlying principles, it would take decades, possibly centuries." Or as Zexgoth added grimly, "We could do as Captain Morrison suggested, and withdraw from all human territory before they decide to demonstrate their full capabilities." The thought of retreating from conquered worlds made Vexstar's blood boil, but he was not stupid. Pride was a luxury that his species could no longer afford across the galaxy. All similar conversations were taking place in the command centers of every major power. The Krell Collective had called an emergency session of their ruling council. The insectoid leaders buzzed nervously as they reviewed the intelligence reports from Colony 7. "The humans have returned stronger than before," clicked the Prime speaker, her mandibles chattering with anxiety. "This changes everything." "Perhaps we should reconsider our alliance with the Zephyrians," suggested another council member. "If the humans decide to seek revenge for what we have done to their colonies." "Do not speak of retreat," snapped the war leader, his compound eyes glowing with anger. "We are the Krell Collective. We have conquered 100 worlds. We will not cower before one human ship." But even as he spoke, the war leader's confidence was shaken. The footage from Colony 7 showed capabilities that defied explanation. How could they fight an enemy that existed in multiple dimensions? How could they defend against weapons that ignored their shields? But on the diplomatic front, Ambassador Helen Price found herself in an unexpected position of strength. The same Galactic Council members who had voted to restrict human military operations just days before were now requesting emergency meetings to discuss mutual security concerns. The human delegation wishes to address the recent .dot developments, announced the council speaker, his voice carefully neutral. Helen stood up slowly, savoring the moment. For years, she had watched these same beings vote against human interests, abandoning her species to their enemies. Now fear filled their eyes as they looked at her. "Honored council members," she began, "I want to thank you for your concern about recent events. As you know, one of our military vessels has returned from an extended mission. We are still evaluating its capabilities." The Zephyrian delegate shifted nervously in his seat. "Ambassador Price, your ship attacked Imperial vessels in neutral space. This is an act of war." Helen smiled coldly. "I believe you are mistaken, honored delegate, according to Admiral Zexkotha's own report. Your forces were in the process of attacking a human colony when our ship intervened. Self-defense is a recognized right under galactic law. But the level of force used was excessive," protested the Krell representative. "Excessive?" Helen's voice rose. "Not a single life was lost in that engagement. Your own crews were safely contained in their disabled ships until rescue vessels could arrive. I would call that remarkable restraint, wouldn't you?" The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the implication. If the Defiant could disable 20 warships without killing anyone, what could it do if it really wanted to cause damage? "What does humanity want?" asked the speaker finally. Helen had been waiting for this question for years. Justice, the immediate. Release of all human prisoners held by Dominion Alliance forces, the withdrawal of all occupation forces from human colonies, and reparations for the damages caused by 11 years of unprovoked aggression. "That's impossible," sputtered the Zephyrian delegate. "We cannot simply abandon our rightful conquests." "Then, perhaps," Helen said quietly, "you should ask Admiral Zexkoth about the futility of fighting something you don't understand." While the politicians argued, the Defiant was making its presence felt across human space. The ship appeared without warning at Harmony Station, where a Zephyrian occupation force had been terrorizing the human population for 3 years. "Captain." Morrison's voice echoed across all frequencies as the alien ship scrambled to respond to the sudden appearance of the legendary human vessel. "This is Captain Morrison to all Zephyrian forces in this system. You have exactly 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures. Any ship that remains after that time will be disabled and its crew detained." The Zephyrian commander, a veteran named Kexthal, opened a channel to the human ship. "This is Commander Kexthal. I have my orders to hold this station. I will not abandon my post." "I understand your position, Commander," Morrison replied, and there was something almost sympathetic in his voice. "But you need to understand mine. For 11 years I've watched from ... elsewhere, as your people enslaved and tortured innocent humans. I've seen the prison camps, the forced labor, the experiments on children. My patience has limits." What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Harmony Station incident. The Defiant didn't attack the Zephyrian ships. It did something far more unsettling. The human vessels seemed to phase out of normal space-time, becoming translucent like a ghost. Then it moved directly toward the largest Zephyrian battleship, passing through the vessel's shields as if they didn't exist. For a moment, both ships occupied the same space, and the alien crew reported seeing human figures moving through their corridors like spirits. Then the Defiant solidified again, pushing the Zephyrian ship aside as gently as a person might move a toy. The battleship's engines shut down, its weapons powered down, and its life support systems switched to minimal settings. The ship was completely disabled, but the crew was unharmed. "How?" whispered Commander Kextel into his radio. "We learned that reality is more flexible than most people realize," Morrison answered. "We learned to exist between dimensions, to phase in and out of normal space at will. We learned patience from beings who measure time in millions of years. And we learned that true power comes from knowing when not to use it." The other Zephyrian ships in the system immediately began evacuation procedures. Within the hour, the entire occupation force was gone, leaving behind the human colonists they had held prisoner for 3 years. Similar scenes played out across a dozen star systems over the next week. The Defiant appeared wherever human prisoners were being held wherever colonies remained under alien occupation. Each time the response was the same: swift evacuation by the occupying forces, often without a shot being fired. The message was clear to everyone in the galaxy. Humanity was back, and they were no longer the desperate, outgunned defenders they had been 11 years ago. 3 weeks after the Harmony Station incident, the galaxy had changed completely. The Dominion Alliance, which had seemed unstoppable just a month before, was falling apart. Member species were abandoning the Alliance as fast as they could. Desperate to avoid being associated with the failed campaign against humanity, President Kate Williams stood in the same office where she had watched refugee ships arrive for years. Now she was watching liberation vessels depart, carrying supplies and medical aid to the newly freed human colonies. The change was so dramatic it felt like a dream. "Final report, Madam President," said Fleet Admiral Tony Rodriguez as he entered her office. "The last Cephrian occupation force has withdrawn from New Austin. All human colonies are now free." Kate turned from the window, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. All of them? Even the Outer Rim worlds? All of them? The Defiant made one final appearance at the Kepler mining stations yesterday. The Krell forces there evacuated so quickly they left their equipment behind. Dr. Peter Kane looked up from his datapad. The psychological impact has been even more significant than the military one. Every major power in the galaxy is terrified of what the Defiant might do next. They're all requesting peace talks. Kate sat down heavily in her chair. The relief was overwhelming, but it was mixed with other emotions she couldn't quite identify. Fear, perhaps, or uncertainty about what came next. "Has Captain Morrison responded to our communication request yet?" she asked. Tony shook his head. "Nothing direct. But there are reports that the Defiant has been seen in orbit around Earth. Long-range sensors detected it briefly before it vanished again." "I want to meet with him," Kate said firmly. "We need to understand what happened during those 11 years. We need to know what humanity has become." Her wish was granted sooner than expected. As if summoned by her words, every communication device in the building activated at once. Captain Morrison's voice filled the room, calm and clear. "President Williams, this is Captain Morrison. I believe it's time we talked." Kate grabbed the nearest communicator. "Captain, where are you? We've been trying to reach you for weeks." "Here," Morrison replied simply. The office windows suddenly filled with light as the massive bulk of the UES Defiant materialized in the sky above Geneva. The ship was even more impressive up close, its hull pulsing with energies that made the air itself seem to shimmer. "My God," whispered Tony. "How did it get so close without our sensors detecting it?" "We learned to exist between spaces," Morrison's voice explained. "To move through dimensions that your instruments cannot detect. It's just one of many things we discovered during our time away." Kate stared up at the impossible vessel, hovering silently above the city. "Captain, we need to meet. There are so many questions." "I know. Transport to coordinates that I'm sending to your navigation systems. Come alone. But bring Admiral Rodriguez and Dr. Kane if you wish. It's time you learned what we found out there." An hour later, Kate found herself in a small transport ship, approaching the Defiant. Up close, the vessel was even more breathtaking. The hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and patterns of light moved across its surface in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Docking bay opening," reported the pilot, "but I'm not sure how. The opening wasn't there a second ago." They landed in a bay that was far larger than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. Kate, Tony, and Dr. Kane were met by a familiar figure in an unfamiliar uniform. Captain Morrison looked older, weathered by experiences that had left their mark on his face and eyes. "Welcome aboard the Defiant," he said, but his voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there 11 years ago. "I apologize for the delay in meeting with you, but we had to ensure that humanity's enemies understood the new situation first." Dr. Kane was staring around the docking bay with wide eyes. "The internal space is larger than the external dimensions. It's impossible." Morrison smiled, and for a moment he looked like the officer they remembered. "Dr. Kane, over the past 11 years, we've learned that impossible is a very limited concept. Come, let me show you what we discovered." They were led through corridors. that seemed to bend and twist in ways that defied geometry. The walls were covered with symbols that shifted and changed as they watched, and the very air hummed with power. "Where did you go?" Kate asked as they walked. "What happened to you?" "We were taken," Morrison replied. "Pulled into a place between dimensions by beings so ancient that they remember when our galaxy was young. They had been watching our species for millennia, waiting to see if we were ready for the next step in our evolution. They entered what must have been the bridge, though it bore little resemblance to any human ship design. Crew members moved between stations that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once." Kate recognized some faces: Chief Engineer Lisa Brooks, Communications Specialist Amy Davis, Tactical Officer Ryan Carter, but they had all been changed by their experience. "The teachers called themselves the architects," Morrison continued. "They were the ones who seeded intelligence throughout the galaxy billions of years ago. They've been waiting to see which species would prove worthy of inheriting their knowledge." Tony stared at the impossible technology surrounding them, and they chose us. "Not exactly," said Lisa Brooks, approaching from her engineering station. Her voice, like Morrison's, carried new harmonics. "They tested us. For 11 years, we lived in their realm, learning their ways. We studied the fundamental forces that hold reality together. We learned to manipulate space and time, to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Amy Davis joined them, her eyes now containing depths that seemed infinite. "But the most important thing we learned was restraint. The architects showed us civilizations that had gained great power and used it to destroy themselves. They taught us that wisdom must come before strength." Dr. Kane was frantically taking notes on his datapad. "This explains the dimensional phasing, the impossible movements. You're not just using advanced technology, you're operating on a completely different level of physics. The question now," Morrison said, looking directly at Kate, "is what humanity does with this knowledge. The architects gave us these abilities not to conquer, but to protect, to ensure that the innocent are safe from those who would abuse power." Kate felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What are you saying, Captain?" "Saying that humanity is no longer just another species struggling for survival in a hostile galaxy. We've become something more, something that other civilizations will look to for guidance and protection. The question is, are we ready for that responsibility?" Ryan Carter spoke up from his tactical station. "The galaxy is watching us, Madam President. How we use our new abilities will determine whether we become a force for peace or just another tyrannical empire." Kate looked around at the crew of the Defiant. These people had been changed by experiences beyond human understanding, but she could still see their humanity in their eyes. They were still the same brave souls who had vanished 11 years ago, but they had been given wisdom to match their newfound power. "What do you recommend, Captain?" she asked. Morrison gestured toward the main view screen, which showed a view of Earth hanging in space below them. "We recommend that humanity embraces its new role carefully. We've already demonstrated our capabilities to our former enemies. Now we need to show the galaxy that we can be trusted with the power we've been given." "The Zephyrians and Krell are requesting formal peace negotiations," Tony reported. "They're offering full reparations for their aggression." "We should have accept," Morrison said. "But we should also make it clear that any future aggression against innocent species will not be tolerated. The architects gave us these abilities to maintain balance in the galaxy." Dr. Kane looked up from his notes. "What about the technology? Will you share it with Earth?" Lisa Brooks answered. "Some of it. The peaceful applications, improved energy sources, medical advances, faster-than-light communication. But the weapons technology will remain with the Defiant and any future ships we might build. That knowledge is too dangerous to spread widely." Nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. Humanity hadn't just gained a powerful warship. They had been given a responsibility to protect the weak and maintain peace throughout the galaxy. "There's something else," Morrison added quietly. "The architects told us that we aren't the only species they've been watching. There are others out there, beyond the edge of known space, who may not share our values. Eventually, we may need to defend not just humanity, but all the civilizations in this galaxy." The implications were staggering. Kate looked out at the Starzen tried to imagine the challenges that lay ahead. Humanity had spent 11 years believing they were on the verge of extinction. Now they found themselves elevated to the role of galactic protectors. "We'll need new laws, new institutions," she said finally. "Ways to ensure that this power is used responsibly." "Agreed," Morrison replied. "The Defiant will serve as humanity's guardian. But we cannot be everywhere at once. Other ships will need to be built, other crews trained. But carefully and with the wisdom the architects taught us." Amy Davis spoke up from her station.